Welcome to Podio Commentary. Today we dive into a world where fists do more than just fight. They seek redemption. In the sultry heat of the Florida Keys, Jake Gyllenhaal's Dalton, a character battered by life in the relentless cage of the UFC, finds himself in a dive bar that's more than just a pit stop. It's his shot at salvation. Through Dalton's eyes, we explore the redemption of a man who's fought battles far beyond the cage, now facing the ultimate test in a small town teetering on the edge of ruin and revival. This is a story of second chances, of the fight within, set against the backdrop of a community's struggle against its own demons, and those seeking to use their power to hurt those who don't listen. Join us as we unpack the layers of Roadhouse 2024, where every punch thrown is a step closer to redemption. Hi, what's going on, everybody? How you doing? My name is Matt Jarbo. Welcome back to Podio Commentary. Today, new format time. We're trying a new format here on the podcast because I've been really wanting to sit down and discuss the 2024 remake of Roadhouse, directed by Doug Liman, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor in his very first starring role. I don't expect him to get much more after this movie, but that's neither here nor there, but we'll talk about that. One of the things that drew me to this movie is I just wanted to see Doug Liman do another action film, right? You know, The Bourne Identity, Edge of Tomorrow. The guy's done Swingers, right? He's done so many different films. He's really an iconic director, and one that I don't believe has ever really kind of gotten his full due in Hollywood. I think he's a working man's director, but he never gets like the accolades or any of the awards or I guess money, fame, fortune, whatever, that so many other directors get who tackle massive IPs. Here, this movie is a remake of a beloved classic, but I'm going to give you a shocker. I've never seen the classic. I've never seen the 1987 Roadhouse starring Patrick Swayze. So I have no frame of reference. So when I talked to people about this movie after I saw it and they all told me that they hated it, it was weird to me because I really enjoyed it. But when I told them that I've never seen the original, they were like, oh, yeah, well, that explains it, which is a very weird kind of gatekeepy way of approaching a movie like this. Now, I'm notoriously known for not liking a lot of remakes. I feel like they are irrelevant and unnecessary. And to be fair, this movie is not going to blow anyone's socks off. It's not. It doesn't even really need to be called Roadhouse. It could probably be called practically anything else, even though it does share a similar story with the original movie. Having a remake, I don't know, it didn't really feel like it needed to be this movie. But that being said, what it was is something that I really enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to talking through it with you guys today. So what we're going to do is we're going to approach the subject, the movie, in 3 different acts. We're going to do a deep dive, my thoughts on the film, and then the conclusion. One of the things I want to stress is as Podio Commentary settles into its own in 2024, we do have a voicemail line for you to use if you want to call in and leave your thoughts on the movies. If you head over to youtube.com/Podio Commentary, you can find the information on our community tab. But if you're looking for the number, it is 323-400-4956. And as we migrate into what's going to be coming in April, which I'll talk about at the end of the show, I really want to get some of your guys' opinions on some of the movies I'm going to be talking about, because it is out of my wheelhouse for what I usually talk about. And I'm both nervous and excited. But as with every episode of the show, the concept always remains the same. I want to have a conversation about these movies and ultimately why I enjoy them. Because what is a movie if it's not something for us to find some kind of love in? You know what I mean? There's no such thing as a bad movie. There are movies that aren't great, but there's no such thing as a bad movie. And so with that, let's just get to talking about Roadhouse 2024, a movie that may not impress you, but it sure as hell impressed the hell out of me.
Hey, Frankie. Yeah. Is there a hospital nearby?
Literally, who gives a
Shut the up and fight, asshole.
Is there a hospital nearby? Is it like too far? Is it close?
About like 25 minutes, I'd say. Like depending on the traffic, what time of day. Mo, shut the up.
Hey, what's your name?
Dell.
Del? You don't have to do this, man. You don't have to lose. You're gonna lose in front of all your friends.
In front of? Oh, they're not here to just watch.
Oh, cool. Well, that's hardly fair.
Why, it's not fair.
Oh, I just slapped you. Are you all right?
What?
Act 1. The Road to Roadhouse. In Act 1 of our journey, we'll trace the intricate path of the Roadhouse remake from its initial conception to its dramatic realization. The tale begins in 2013, weaving through years of creative shifts, from director changes to casting whirlwinds with MMA fighters and A-list stars, and finally landing in the hands of Jake Gyllenhaal and Doug Liman. We'll also dive into the contentious battle between Amazon and Doug Liman over the decision to release the film through streaming, a move that sparked debate over the future of film distribution and artistic vision. I understand that the intro is a little bit on the heavy side, but it's true. This movie has been trying to get off the ground for quite some time. It goes back to November 2013, when MGM, before being bought by Amazon for total 9 years ahead of time, began developing the movie with Rob Cohen directing. Now, Rob Cohen is, Fast and Furious, kicked off that franchise, the first XXX movie. I think he did the third Mummy movie. So he understands how to, do action films, how to do kind of, I don't want to say grittier, but maybe more grounded, because the first XXX, despite how kind of crazy and over the top it was still relatively grounded. The first Fast and Furious is the most grounded of any of the films in that franchise. If you go back to the first Fast and Furious movie, there's literally no way anyone involved with that would be like, one day, 20 years down the road, we're going to go to space. So I can see why Rob Cohen would be a decent choice to work on this. But unfortunately, in September of 2015, Cohen and the writer that they had hired with them, Michael Stokes, vacated the project, while mixed martial arts artist Ronda Rousey was cast in the lead role. They wanted to bring a female-led remake of the movie out there, which makes a lot of sense because at the time, you could argue Ronda Rousey was at the height of her career, right? In 2015, she actually had a cameo appearance, a bit part in Fast and Furious 7 that did come out in 2015. And so you could see maybe they wanted to kind of build off of that. She was at the height of her game with being an MMA fighter. And since then, maybe it's kind of gone downhill. But that didn't happen. And then the next month, so in October of 2015, Nick Cassavetes boarded the film as writer and director. Now, you may know Nick Cassavetes from one film predominantly. And if you happen to be a guy in a relationship or a girl in a relationship, you know the movie The Notebook. The Ryan Gosling, Rachel McAdams classic film was directed by Nick Cassavetes, who, largely has done, some thriller type work. He did Alpha Dogs with Justin Timberlake and Anton Yelchin in 2006, which was actually a really solid movie. And if you remember the 1998, or was it 1997, action movie Face Off? Yeah, that was directed by John Woo, but Nick Cassavetes played Gina Gershon's mobster brother, the guy with the bald head and the ponytail in that movie. And I always thought that was really interesting. But after Nick Cassavetes came on board, obviously things kind of ground to a halt, and the studio then put the project on hold for the next 6 years until November 2021, when MGM, I think now they were in the process of being bought by Amazon, but they decided to try this again by bringing in Jake Gyllenhaal and getting Doug Liman to direct it. And they decided that they really wanted to prioritize this film despite both Gyllenhaal and Lyman's individual commitments. You had Jake Gyllenhaal getting ready to shoot Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, and Doug Liman was working on Everest. Around this time, the search for a new writer began to revise the previous draft that had been written a few years earlier. And so then by August of 2022, Sheldon Turner had turned in a rewrite of the original script, but Anthony Bagarozzi and Chuck Mondry ultimately received the final screenplay credit. And the original writer of the original movie, David Lee Henry, did get a nod as well. I always find that really weird in these movies when like the way that the Writers Guild works with crediting. You would figure that like if these guys maybe wrote like the original story and then another writer came in and like revamped pretty much everything with the exception of that original story, that they should get some kind of credit. But unfortunately, that didn't happen here. Now, I'm also not going to speak to how the WGA works. I'm as much as I love writing and I love screenplay writing. I'm not in the guild, no freaking idea. But it's always come across to me as very kind of weird, just how they do it. But anyway, they did it. They brought in Sheldon Turner. He finished up the draft. And then from there, in August of 2022, right after he turned everything in, Amazon, which had now at that point purchased MGM only 5 months earlier. But what was really interesting is when Amazon greenlit the movie, they gave a choice to Doug Liman and his creative team. It was either they could put the movie in theaters, but their budget would only be $60 million, or they could have it exclusively for streaming with a budget of $80 million. Ultimately, they chose the $80 million route, and that was something that Jake Gyllenhaal has stood by, even though Doug Liman was not thrilled with it after the fact. He actually decided that he was going to be boycotting the premiere at South by Southwest in protest, and that made a lot of news before the movie came out. It didn't, in my opinion, look really good for the movie. I feel like they found themselves kind of between a rock and a hard place with it. Like, how do you promote this movie with an iconic director who's now like not going to go to the premiere because he wanted the movie to go to cinemas, right? But Gyllenhaal, like I said, was sympathetic to his views, but he made it clear. He came in, he tried to play peacekeeper, and he said that, no, this is what they decided to do. This is a choice that Doug made. It was Amazon's choice. This is what they wanted to do with it. And they just had to have to kind of deal with it. And ultimately, Lyman, I believe, ended up going to the premiere, you know, and everything. They kind of, maybe they worked it out, or just they got him to go. And that's pretty good. But even before all that happened, there was even like another bit of controversy. February of 2024 of this year, the original screenwriter of the 1989 version, R. Lance Hill. Did I say 1987 earlier? Sorry, it's 1989. R. Lance Hill sued MGM and Amazon claiming copyright infringement. And then he also accused the studio of using AI generated voices to complete the project during the 2023 SAG after strike. Okay. Right? Like, okay. You know, I mean, there's been no proof of that, right? Like the only other real movie, I don't want to say real movie, but like the only other big movie that this guy wrote is the Steven Seagal 1991 classic Out for Justice, which is a good movie. I do like that movie quite a bit. But the idea there is basically like, you know, like this guy, I don't know, maybe he was seeking relevance, maybe he's seeking money, maybe he's whatever. But if you're going to accuse a studio of using AI generated voices to complete the project during the SAG after strike, you know, you got to have some proof, I guess. But his ultimate goal, believe it or not, was to get the courts to bar the release of the film. Now, he might be thinking that because the movie does have a bit of a departure from the original, it's not Patrick Swayze, it's not the classic, it's a new take on it. It looks a little bit different, you know, and maybe he just didn't want it being his original story being sullied, his original idea being whatever. It's entirely possible that he just wanted to keep this movie from coming out so he could get, like, maybe get a settlement, maybe get some money. I don't know. I mean, people in Hollywood work in mysterious ways. Much like religious figures in some cases. They work oddly. They all have their own motivations. They all have their own things that they're trying to accomplish. And I think in this particular case, maybe that's what he was up to. But we'll ultimately never know, because the film did in fact come out March 21st, 2024 on Amazon. Act 2. Cuban Coffee hits hard. In this act, we step into the gritty world of Roadhouse, where Elwood Dalton's struggle for redemption takes center stage. A troubled ex-UFC fighter turned head bouncer, Dalton's journey from the brink of despair in the path of an oncoming train to the heart of the Florida Keys community of Glass Key is fraught with violence, loyalty, and the quest for a second chance. His encounters with the locals and a motorcycle gang and the deep-seated corruption in the town weave a complex tapestry of challenge and change. This is a very simple film, right? It tries to play to some like larger themes, I guess, but it's very simplistic. It is very much like Shane, the Western Shane. I think that's probably one of the better ways to do it. The good guy comes into town, cleans up the town, and then leaves. And I'm getting ahead of myself here, but obviously we know at this point there's going to be spoilers. What I enjoyed about the opening of this movie was that Doug Liman, you could tell, was trying to showcase the gritty realism of, backyard brawls and bar fights and things like that by having Post Malone beat up a bunch of guys, making money. And then here comes, Elwood Dalton. And as soon as he sees Elwood Dalton, he's like, I'm not going to fight this guy, F this guy, and, whatever. And that's kind of what Dalton does. He has a history. We don't know what it is yet, but we know that he's an ex-UFC fighter. We know that he's got definitely a notorious history about him, and one that he uses in order to kind of scam bars in order to get the money when the challenger just taps out. And that, of course, ends up getting him stabbed in the side by an angry bar patron, an angry gambler, who is very much upset at the loss of $500. But while he's sitting there and he's bleeding to his trunk and trying to get himself patched up, here comes Frankie, played by Jessica Williams, who is very much trying to find a bouncer for her bar, simply known as Roadhouse, in Glass Key, Florida. And she offers him a job. She offers him $5,000 a week and a place to stay. At first, he kind of just, gives up on it, doesn't want to do it, and drives away, complete with having a stab wound in his side from what appeared to be at least a 3 to 4 inch blade. Something that would probably cause anyone to want to go to the hospital. But what he does? He drives to a train track and just parks his car there, ready to die. He's just ready to give it all up, ready to die. What I liked about the scene is you see the train coming from a distance. I mean, sure, it's CG, but you see the train coming and you see him looking at it and you see him kind of preparing himself for death. And then you also see the train be fully aware that the car is in the track. And so the train starts to put on its brakes and you see the sparks. And at that point, it's just not slowing down fast enough. And he kind of realizes, wait, I don't want to die. And he tries to start his car. And obviously the car is not going to start. And then he just, backs up and the train just takes out the back of his car. And he almost dies as a result of that, and that's kind of a wake up call. And he sees Frankie's receipt with her information on it. And so he decides to take a Greyhound out to Glass Key, Florida, down the Keys, where he ends up running into a little girl named Charlie. I don't want to say little girl. She's a teenager who runs a bookstore. And she kind of gives him a little bit of information about the town, gives him a book to read with information about the town. And it's just kind of a way to first establish some kind of root there. And I really do feel like that is what they were trying to do with it in that moment. He befriends Charlie. She runs the bookstore with her dad. Her mom had died. The bookstore was her mom's idea. She runs the bookstore in the day while her dad is at work because that's how they afford this. And it does give you, I almost want to say it's a bit of a slice of life sort of thing, because I think a lot of people can really resonate with the struggle of loss in the family, having to maintain this thing, working multiple jobs. I mean, it's not that uncommon these days for people to have multiple jobs. And so I just kind of really enjoyed that. She wasn't I would say the best actor in the movie, but her I don't even want to say her chemistry with Gyllenhaal was good. Gyllenhaal was just kind of giving off this vibe of like just complete aloofness. You know what I mean? Like it gets better over the course of the film, but he was really kind of giving up this idea of aloofness where he's just kind of there. He's just kind of following the road wherever it might take him. You know, and as he makes his way down to the roadhouse, he ends up meeting, you know, the people who work there and watches some of the fights take place. And there's a couple other bouncers and he ends up stepping in, you know, beating up a guy, breaking his fingers, kicking him out. And then it kind of goes from there. What I enjoyed about his introduction to the bar is that, again, he's just kind of like aloof about it. He doesn't really seem to care until the moment he absolutely has to care. And I think in this particular movie, like that's kind of the whole point where it's like, he is trying to not care. He doesn't want to get involved. He doesn't want to be upset. He doesn't want to be angry. And over the course of the film, we find out this is because he killed another UFC fighter in the ring. He lost it. He beat this guy up. He kept punching him when he was down. He ultimately killed him. And that's what caused him to leave the UFC. And that's a really good motivation for the whole Zen approach to it, right? He's thinking to himself like, man, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to get in that mind space again, that headspace. I don't want to do that because when I do that, bad things happen. And so, you know, he definitely feels like there's this punishment that he has to kind of live with. And he's just trying to like go day to day, I think without, you know, again, like, you know, sunsetting himself. But what's great is like the biker gang that comes to the bar, the one that Frankie hired him for, led by a local, you know, criminal named Dell. They get into a confrontation and he slaps the ever-loving hell out of all of them, which is great. And then breaks some arms and busts some nose and stuff. But after he beats them up, he's like, look, like, you know, where's the hospital? I need to take you guys to the hospital. So he drives all of them to the hospital in order to, you know, go, look, like this didn't have to happen, but I'm not going to be a jerk about it, right? Like he's actively trying to help people that he has harmed. And that's kind of, that shows you a lot about his character. He wants to help people who he has harmed. He doesn't seek out to harm anyone, but it keeps coming to him. And that's really a lot of what happens in the movie. Because as we find out, you know, right after that moment, he ends up meeting the Dr. Ellie, played by Daniela Melchior from the Suicide Squad and a few other films. And, you know, they kind of have this thing where she's, you know, she's patching him up and whatnot. And she goes to look at the stab wound that he has from the beginning of the movie. And she's like, oh, let me suture that. And he goes, no, I earned that one. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm watching this, like, what is it that he earned? What exactly is it that he earned? He earned a knife wound to his gut. But think about that for a second, right? Looking at his mentality, his attitude, he decides to head in to, you know, this bar, like this warehouse where this fight's happening. He uses his infamy to kind of scam everybody there by forcing the main fighter to quit. And when the main fighter quits, he then gets the money. And that's when the guy attacks him and says, you cost me $500. So he feels like he earned that scar because he hurt that guy unintentionally, but he still hurt that guy, right? The gambler is wanting to make a return on their investment and thinks that they're, you know, again, there's like no, I guess, reality where you would think that you would always win, but the guy was upset that he got screwed over. And that's why he says, oh, I earned this. And I really liked that little character moment because I think it's largely overlooked in many ways. I think it is largely overlooked, but it's also shows you kind of just who he is as a person. The downside that sucks about this is like Ellie is, you know, the love interest, right? The Kelly Lynch role from the original film. But they've got no chemistry. They've got like no chemistry at all. Because, you know, eventually, like after the montage of them at the bar and whatever, like Dell comes back and Dell tries to kill him by, you know, ramming his girlfriend's truck into the rail of the bridge. And then ultimately they fall in the water and then he swims away. But when he gets back home to the, to the boathouse, there's Dalton in there, or sorry, there's Dell in there with a shotgun. And they fight. It's a cool scene. And then they chuck him over the edge. And as Dalton is trying to get more information out of him, right? Like, we know that there's a crocodile nearby, but you don't know if it's actually there or if it's an urban legend. And then out of nowhere, this gigantic croc just grabs Dell and chews him to shit. And I'm just like, oh my God, wow. I mean, like you should know that was going to be something in the movie, right? They mentioned it ahead of time. They talked about the crocodile hiding its food, about the dog, of the dock master being eaten by a croc, and everything else. And everyone knowing that crocodiles hide their food. That's taught in kindergarten in the area. It's very much this idea, like, you still aren't really expecting it to be as violent as it was. And then, of course, like, it cuts to the next day. The cops are searching for the body. Everyone knows they're not going to find it. But he gets an idea about what exactly is happening with the roadhouse. Like, why is it this gang is coming for it? And that's because it has everything to do with a guy named Ben Brandt. Ben Brandt is a local. His father's a real estate mogul who also got into selling drugs. His father is now in jail. So now Ben is in charge and he's trying to run the roadhouse out of town so he can take it over and he can build his development, because it's all real estate. That's all he wants to do. And he's played by Billy Magnuson, who, I mean, like, the first time we meet his character, he's on a boat. It's choppy. And he has a guy out there trying to give him a shave while he is on on this boat. We know that it's like, no guy would ever actually do this, but it's meant to showcase that he's like not afraid of anything, that he'll do anything to get what he wants. And it's just really like over the top. Like, you would have seen something like this heavily in the 80s. So again, as I've said, all of these people are going after Dalton, but it's not his fault. He's just doing a job, but they're all attracted to him. Like, he's the one in everybody's way. I don't know if I feel like that's entirely earned. It definitely feels like it's just a plot device to get us from point A to point B to point C. Like, I get all of that, and I have no real issue with it, but it's pretty apparent. Like, it's just like, there's like critical thinking here that's like, why is everyone out for him? What did he do? He's only been here a little bit. I feel like there's more to the story that he's trying to piece it together. And of course, as he's piecing it together, the audience is piecing it together as well. But this is where things get crazy, because Brandt's father, who's in jail, is completely unimpressed with this kid. And so he calls in a ringer. He calls in a guy. He calls in Knox, played by Conor McGregor. Now, I will tell you this right off the bat. Conor McGregor, horrible actor. Horrible actor. Did they not do ADR in his voice? You can barely understand anything that he says. He sounds like a freaking leprechaun most of the movie. I don't know if that's what he's going for, but I'll say this. It doesn't, even though he's not a good actor, and he would probably beat the crap out of me for saying that, man, did he have fun making this movie. And his energy was infectious. I'll fully admit that. So like, every time he's on the screen, you don't necessarily know what he's going to do. And that kind of unsettling aspect of it, right? That you just don't know. And so it works really well for trying to like predict it. You can't really predict, like, it's going to be crazy, but you don't know the extent. Because when we first meet him, he's having sex with a woman in Italy. Her husband comes home. He like jumps out of the balcony. He's completely butt naked. So you see his ass, like a lot of his ass, so much of his ass. And he gets a phone call and you're like, where does he got the phone? Right. I'm like, is it in his ass? And then like, oh, he's got his shoes on and it's in his pocket. Like, it's in his sock. Like, okay. And it's a call from Brandt's dad. That's like, hey, I need you to go take care of this problem. And he's like, okay, I'm on it. And he beats the crap out of some guy wearing a nice jacket. And then it smash cuts to this marketplace completely ablaze and him wearing the jacket and walking away. Like, he just burns this place to the ground and assaults people and takes their stuff. And like, no one does anything. So, I mean, obviously, when we first meet the character, he's very much, and I mean very much, trying to assert his dominance, and he does it. He does it flawlessly, to be fair. And then he ends up going out there to the bar, right? And he confronts Dalton or Elwood after Ben Brandt kind of like shows us the whole thing about the death in the UFC ring to kind of throw Dalton off. And then, because he's spooked, he's shook, right? He's absolutely shook. And then here comes Knox with a bunch of other guys, and they just start beating people up in the bar. And so there's a fight between the two of them, and ultimately he loses the first fight. And he goes and he's like, I gotta get the hell out of here, man. I just can't do this. Like, I gotta leave. And because he's afraid of what might happen. Now, it's like we as the audience are meant to go, is he just afraid of fighting this guy? Is he afraid of losing? But as he's getting ready to leave and he goes by the bookstore, he finds out that there was an attack on it earlier from Brandt's guys, and Charlie's in the hospital. And because he likes Charlie, that's when he basically goes and he's like, okay, that point has been reached. And now all bets are off. And this is where I was like, oh yeah, he's just going to get in there and he's just going to mess everybody up. He goes and finds the guy who would have hurt Charlie, kills him, right? He kills him. Like, he punches him in the throat, breaks his trachea. The guy falls into the water, drowns, right? That's, basically kills him. Ends up, taking that guy, finds out where there's going to be a big drug, or a big money drop, like $1 million or something. So he goes out there, beats up the cop, takes the money. There's this great line where, like, because, well, he brings out the dead body. That, by the way, he kills the guy, takes him out of his, out of the house, drives him back to the boathouse where he's at, gets a whole bunch of ice, puts him in a cooler, puts the body in a cooler, then goes to bed. He's clearly got a concussion and he clearly just killed this guy. But the thing that I really don't like about this is where it kind of goes, like, it shouldn't have probably done this necessarily, because he goes and he's pissed off and he finds the guy he beats, he kills him. You think, okay, now he's going to go and he's going to fight everyone. He's motivated, adrenaline. Let's go. The momentum is there. But no, like I said, he goes to bed, gets up in the morning, goes and beats up a cop, uses a cop's pistol to shoot the dead guy a couple times, and then tells the cop, look, I'm going to, short-term memory. You're not even going to remember this. You get hit in the head enough, you're not going to have short-term memory. And then, of course, like, gets totally, like, it's meant to be a joke, but it's like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just that part, like, I feel like they cut some stuff out. It doesn't make the most amount of sense. But what they did do is he took the money, and then here comes Big Dick, the sheriff, which is, Ellie's dad. Sorry, that already happened. I should have mentioned that. And then he's like, look, they've got my daughter. They want the money. Just come on. And so, he heads out there with the boat that he stole, that he took from Ellie's ex-boyfriend, who's a cop. That scene's pretty funny because the guy's like, get back here with my boat. He's like, I'll give it back in a couple hours. Oh, all right, fine. You got 2 hours. It's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? He goes out to the boat, finds out that Brandt actually did kidnap Ellie, double crossing her dad, but the money's not there. He ignites a bomb on the boat. And then, they end up basically just like getting out of there. He saves Ellie. They all try to get back, they're all fighting on a boat. Knox is still trying to follow them, right? Like, Knox is still out there. He's chasing them now. They end up all back at the roadhouse. I'm skipping a few steps. So they end up all back at the roadhouse. And then Knox had stolen a car, comes on in, and then the final fight breaks up, right? Because there's this line where he steals a truck. This is Knox, drives it through the bar, kind of hits Jake Gyllenhaal in the leg. And he's all like, oh, your leg looks pretty bad. It's like, you're a bad driver. And he's like, yeah, wrong side of the road. It's a funny little line. It's a funny little quip. But again, because Conor McGregor's accent is so whatever with this movie, like, it's hard to kind of hear. But then they get into their fight, and their fight's pretty brutal. It's pretty damn brutal. It's a good fight. And then here comes Ben, and Ben then tries to get Conor or Knox to kill Elwood, and he's just yelling at him to do it. And then Elwood is, or Knox is so freaking amped up, right? He's so amped up. He just snaps Ben's neck, like just kills him. And then it's okay. And then they get back into the fight. And then ultimately, Dalton wins, beats him up, stabs him a couple times with some broken, sticks and stuff. And he wins. And then this is when the sheriff shows up and he's all like, "Get out of here, Dalton. You were never here." And Dalton just goes and leaves, doesn't really say goodbye to Ellie, just kind of goes, gets his stuff, heads back out to the Greyhound station. And we find Charlie is okay. And they're talking. And then we find out that he left the $1 million for her and her dad. He'd given it to them so they could rebuild. And as he gets on the Greyhound and he's leaving, we kind of see flashes of like all the other characters, like they're rebuilding the bar. And they're all better off for him having been there, right? And they all kind of look at the Greyhound and no one, they like, all right, there he goes, sort of thing. And it's just like, then he leaves and then you see the tree. The tree is its own thing. The movie, I know I went through the whole thing pretty much, but it's like there are some really good moments in this thing. There's good action. Probably one of the bigger problems with it is largely the use of CG in the fight scenes. For some of the camera movements, they use that. Some of the violence, they use that to maybe like make the hits seem harder, hit harder, hit faster, more visceral, more violent, more, those kind of things. And I think that's a big factor with it, to be honest with you. Like that's why some people didn't really care for it, because it was like, why are you CGing fight scenes? But it was largely with like Post Malone at the beginning and a couple of things in the bar. And then some of the camera movement stuff when it was Knox versus Dalton. And other than that, like it was good. Like Jake Gyllenhaal really did kind of have this character portrayal of a guy who just kind of lost everything. He is lost and he doesn't really care as much. But when he starts to care about something, that's why he gets pushed too far and he does what he does. I think I just kind of wish like they would have like not had him like go to sleep with this body and like just kind of, you have the momentum leading into the climax, like lead into the climax with it. Like that's what you got to do. But they didn't. And that's the story choice on their part. But ultimately, like the movie was a lot of fun. It was just like, it was a good action movie. And it's one that I think a lot of people will enjoy if you kind of remove, the legacy and the nostalgia from the title of the film.
I can't see what this is about. Where the fuck is everyone?
Act 3. Crocs hide their food. In our final act, Crocs hide their food, we turn our lens towards the aftermath of the Roadhouse remake's journey. How does it stack up in the grand scale of expectations versus reality? And what do people generally think of it? This invites us to ponder the remake's legacy and its resonance with an audience ever eager for both nostalgia and novelty. As I kind of mentioned before, a lot of the people that I've talked to who have seen this didn't care for it because they've seen the original so many times. And so to them, it's etched in their brain. That is their childhood. That is their adolescence. That is their upbringing. And when I talk a lot about these remakes, especially in the concept of dealing with nostalgia, one of the things I do like to say is that when you have someone, like who is seeing a remake of something they loved as a kid, it starts to kind of encroach on that safe zone. And that's one of the reasons why I think that when it comes to selling nostalgia on the level that so many of these studios sell nostalgia, that what they do is they end up running the risk of appealing to a new audience without alienating the old. If you look at the 2016 Ghostbusters movie, which I don't really recommend, they tried to alienate the old by appealing to the new. And that's why Sony gave us Afterlife a couple years later, because that appealed to the old in order to bring in the new. In many ways, when we watch a movie like Roadhouse and you're a fan of the original and you talk to someone who hasn't seen the original, you can use it as a way to kind of guide them back. Because, hey, guess what? Roadhouse is also streaming on Amazon. I almost ended up watching Roadhouse immediately following this Roadhouse, just so I'd have a comparison rate. But I wanted to wait to talk about it before I did that, because I wanted to have a fresh set of eyes that were not, I don't want to say tainted, but influenced by having other people's thoughts and opinions. And this, of course, is where in the show, I want to, in the future, like I said before, to have feature voicemails from you guys. Your thoughts, your opinions on these movies. And that number is 323-400-4956. So obviously don't call in with your thoughts about Roadhouse, but check out youtube.com/Podio Commentary, Podio Commentary, and check our community page and you'll see what's upcoming. And I'll be posting the times when I'm going to be recording, or at least the cutoff time for you to submit your comments and your questions and things like that. Because I feel like movies like this are going to be divisive. Movies like this are going to foster conversation. And I also hope that if a movie is one that is not necessarily to your liking, maybe, by listening to me talk about things more positively, or to hear other people give their thoughts and their opinions, we can change some minds. I don't ever want to go into any movie wanting to hate it. I want to go into every movie wanting to enjoy it and to have a good time and to be fun. And I think that is at this point where we are with this. So again, if you want to support the show, be sure to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, and to definitely follow on YouTube and subscribe to us there. Eventually there will be a website coming. Eventually I'll do a lot more. Also, if you want to support the show directly and you want to recommend a movie for me to watch, you can do that over on our Patreon, patreon.com/Matt Jarbo. And there's going to be some upcoming perks with that, different tiers and things along those lines. So I appreciate again everyone for paying attention and listening to this if you made it this far. I'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day. Thank you for listening to Podio Commentary, and peace out.